Democratic and Republican primaries for US Congress are in full swing.
70% of the American people support legislation to ban abortion after a baby is capable.
In first week of May, Virginia will see intense competition in Democratic primary.
It's time to finish the job.
Trump has built up a massive lead of more than 30 points thus far over Nikki Haley in this Republican primary.
Atif Qarney, candidate for the US Congress, stands out for his unusual background. Qarney is a first-generation immigrant, born in Karachi, Pakistan, immigrant to the US at age 10. After Georgetown University, he worked with a large law firm and then served in the United States Marines. In that capacity, he served in Iraq as a combat soldier. Apart from the risks of a violent war, it was also an identity crisis, as war was very unpopular across the Muslim world. Back in the US, Atif opted to become a middle school teacher. His educational activism soon took him into corridors of power as Secretary Education for Virginia.
Right. So we have some of the finest institutions of higher education in the world right here in the Commonwealth, but they can't be operational without the outstanding faculty that we have here in the Commonwealth, because they really are the ones who are working with our students. A lot of phenomenal teachers here in the Commonwealth, and to be part of this moment is really, really chilling.
Now, with this varied background, Atif is standing for the US Congress from North Virginia. Moeed Pirzada interviewed him via a video link.
Did you face very dangerous circumstances in Iraq?
The first couple of weeks were rough. After that, things settled down. It does break my heart that there are injustices, when there are human rights violations, when the election, the way it was handled, it was really unfortunate. Why are we having these problems? Why is it that a set of human beings are seen as less than? As Americans, we value freedom and democracy. What's happening in Pakistan with some accountability, providing a flashlight, but also what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening in Palestine, because we need a long-term solution. Yes, we need an unconditional ceasefire. Yes, we should stop military funding to Israel, to stop. What is that you all want? Let's give them some grace and a time to breathe and think about, okay, what is that you want?
Assalamu alaikum, this is Moeed Pirzada. Today I'm joined by a young, dynamic politician, Mr. Atif Qarney. Atif is standing for the US Congress from North Virginia. The primaries have almost arrived, just a few days away. And Atif brings a very unusual background to this political contest. Atif is a first-generation immigrant, born in Karachi, migrated to the United States at the age of 10. He has subsequently served in the United States Marine in the difficult battle area of Iraq. Back in US, he became a middle school teacher. And from that position, he rose to become the Secretary of Education, Virginia. And now he's standing for the US Congress. Atif, a very warm welcome to this discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Pirzada. It's really good to be here. Thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, Atif, why US Congress? Why not think of business? Why not think of making money in this country? Why US Congress?
Well, there's a lot of ways to make a lot of money, but there's only a few ways that you can serve your at-large community, and I believe in strong public service. Why Congress now specifically? There's a lot of different things I'm working on related to education policy, but also I've been very involved now in the last 6 months running for Congress with what's happening globally as well. So it's an opportunity to really serve the residents here in Virginia where I'm running, but also the at-large community in the United States.
But Atif, the two questions that come to my mind, isn't it too ambitious? Isn't it too audacity of hope and ambition, in a first-generation immigrant to be in the US Congress?
Well, I think you have to blaze the trail for future generations to come. I've actually, like you had mentioned in your introduction, I served in the US Marines. That was not a common thing for somebody, born in Pakistan as an immigrant, somebody from Muslim background. But now there are a lot more people from my background who are in the US military. As more younger and younger generations are coming about. I also served as a public school teacher, and I taught mathematics, but also United States history. So a lot of my education has focused on US history, which is also not that common. Really understanding that US historical context and how it really relates to the whole global context.
Interesting. And then I'm also very interested in US history. What struck you in the US history? What phase of the US history you find the most dynamic, interesting, intriguing?
Yeah, I was always just fascinated as a student. I came here at the age of 10. I really enjoyed how the design and the inception of our nation was, and how the Constitution was designed. and then just learning about the historical context of the indigenous population, and then how it, the makeup of America evolved over time. So just history always fascinated me, and especially American history. So I've been a student of history from a very young age.
So which phase of the US history you have been teaching to your students, which you really enjoyed teaching to your students?
Yeah, so it's mostly focused on modern U.S. history. I got my degree in, pretty much all of U.S. history, but my focus has been pretty much post-Reconstruction. So it really starts at the Civil War, and it starts with the 13th and 14th and 15th Amendment. So it's really focused on justice. And I believe, that's actually been a driving force for my policy making as well, is that every type of public servant, a policymaker has their brand. So my brand is really about justice, and it's really looking at systemic injustices and figuring out solutions, meaningful solutions that can drive home change. So I'd really take.
But tell me one thing. I'm sorry for interrupting. I mean, there are two different roles which I see in you. I mean, you're a middle school teacher. I mean, teaching history, teaching mathematics. I mean, U.S. Marines serving in Iraq in a very unpopular war. But not only all across the world, it was a very unpopular war. I mean, how do you see a reconciliation between two roles?
I think it's the dichotomy of different identities, right? So I'm an immigrant. I'm a Muslim. I'll answer one part of your question is that when I served in Iraq or served in the Marines, I was actually deployed as a combat veteran in Iraq. I was actually one of the first Marines to enter Iraq when the ground invasion started. And I really struggled with that because it was an unpopular war, especially in the Muslim world. And we had not, seen a lot of information when it started. And now we look back at it, again, historically, and there's a lot of regrets that we have too, is that why did we, go into Iraq in the first place? Because it did not really have a relationship to what happened on September 11th. We now understand that there were manufactured lies by the Bush administration to really drive home a specific agenda. So a lot of Americans look back at it and they also struggle with it. Same thing like when we question about why did we get into Vietnam.
What were they thinking then? I mean, now you understand that the Bush administration, created this weapons of mass destruction, but at that time, perhaps most people believed there were weapons. So what were they thinking? I mean, your other colleagues, other U.S. Marines, you said you're among the first U.S. Marines to land in Iraq. I mean, what place was that?
No, it was very tough. There was another gentleman that was in the Marines who was a Muslim, and he actually asked for a general discharge because he struggled with a Muslim going to a Muslim country. I thought that also reflected on my mind as well, and I had very deep conversations with my wife. Actually, my wife was 7 months pregnant when I got deployed, so it was very, challenging on her as well because, here I was with my firstborn on the way, being deployed, being a young man. I was 25, but I felt the responsibility because I had trained and led a lot of young Marines who were ages 18, 19, 20 years old that I was leading into battle. So there was a lot of emotions and a lot of thinking that was tied in, and actually gave me an opportunity when I was deployed to see, okay, well, what is the meaning of one's purpose in life and why am I here? So it actually had a deep impact and really shaped the rest of my life and rest of my public service.
Did you face very dangerous circumstances in Iraq?
There were the first couple of weeks were rough. After that, things settled down. I'm a combat veteran, so what was actually really meaningful that I learned from that experience is building relationships is really important. So a lot of the time, we focus on firefights and combat, but 90% of the times, military personnel are really good at diffusing situations. So the things that I'm really proud of is that because I'm a Muslim, even though I don't know Arabic, but I understand the cultural norms, there were many times where I would work with the local folks living in Iraq, the Iraqis, and we would diffuse situations. So for example, we were using a university at Ad-Divaniyah to set up shop, a military base, and a lot of students were really upset that, hey, why are you using our facility? Because there was already a disruption in education. Some protests broke out, and I played a critical role in engaging those students and bringing the situation down and really, de-escalating the tensions and working with the local communities. And we actually help create a lot of jobs so they can work as interpreters and really help us, really navigate the local communities. So that's what I'm really proud of. And a lot of people don't see that side of military service. They only are focused on the combat part, but there's a civilian engagement tool of diplomacy that is so critical.
So how long you were in Iraq?
I was deployed for 6 months. My overall span of Marine service was 8 years, but specifically in Iraq, my deployment lasted 6 months.
How is life as such as a Marine? I mean, you must have served as a Marine before in the US in different places.
Yeah, it was a great experience because you get to travel the world. You build a camaraderie with folks you have served with. It can have an impact on your family. It was difficult for my wife if I'm deployed or if I'm gone a lot. So actually, that's why I didn't make a long-term, like 20 or 30-year career out of it. After my contracts were done, I did two.
You said you get to travel across the world. I mean, which ports, which countries you got to call upon?
Well, of course, all over the Middle East. But I was in Okinawa in Japan, all over the United States and different bases and so forth.
So how was this transition back to the US? I mean, leaving Marines, becoming a middle school teacher. I mean, how was that?
I actually decided to I was actually working for a law firm before I was deployed because.
Oh, you were working for a law firm, yes.
I was, and I was thinking about going into law school and, wanted to, make good money and so forth. But when I was actually deployed to Iraq, I had a time to reflect as well, and I, wanted to do something meaningful with my life. I came to a realization that I needed to do something more meaningful. So the reason I decided to become a teacher is that I have a lot of educators in my family. Actually, my nanny was in Pakistan was the first principal of an all-girls model school that was established in the 50s. My grandfather, my dada, was a lifetime educator. He was a teacher, professor. My mother was a teacher. So I had a lot of good.
I mean, teaching is in the blood. Is it in DNA? It's in
the blood, and I wanted to serve because I think that's one of the best ways to serve your community. So I came to a realization while actually I was deployed in Iraq, and I came back and I talked to my wife. I'm like, hey, this is what I really want to do. I want to serve by being an educator.
So teaching is a kick to you.
I think it's one of the best ways to really give back to your community and uplift and inspire young minds.
But immigrants from South Asia don't come to the United States for becoming a teacher or even a lecturer. I mean, they want to come here to make money. So when you came back as a Marine, why not become a property dealer? You had a law background, a law firm background, become a car dealer, or some kind of business of import, export. I mean, this country is for making money, as I see. I mean, for the last 1.5 years, everyone wants to make money.
I think you can make enough money and be comfortable and be content. I'm a pretty simple person. I'm happy with making just enough. But for me, happiness comes from really doing meaningful work. And I believe that was instilled in me from my elders in my family. Specifically, I had a lot of good role models who were in public service in Pakistan. And just that's how I was brought up. So that was much more important than me to really make money.
Have you been visiting Pakistan in the last couple of years?
I've actually never been since I moved here. When I came here at the age of 10, my mother is very disappointed. She goes every other year. All her family is here, and I think I'm the only one in my family. My brothers have been back for weddings and so forth. My heart is still in Pakistan. I mean, I love watching cricket.
But your heart is in Pakistan. You have not visited Pakistan.
It is, I know, but I think.
How do you reconcile the two statements?
So we have this, I think the way we think about our identity and our nation is kind of antiquated. I think that we, me, Marine is an identity, being a Muslim is an identity, being a teacher is an identity, being an American is an identity, but so is also being a Pakistani-American, right? I believe I'm more closer to my culture than a lot of people who might, have visited recently and so forth, because it's an identity that travels with you, right? It's not fixed based on where the borders are. It's across the globe. And I think that there is this, sub-ecosystem of Pakistanis across the globe that we're interconnected wherever we are. So
unlike a traditional nation like Germany, France, or UK, The American identity is very varied, is very multidimensional, is very diverse in the sense that people from all over the world are American. I mean, people in any American city or any school perhaps speak more than 100 languages. So what is to be an American, Pakistani-American? I mean, what is that kind of identity? I mean, for you, I mean, raised here after age 10, being a U.S. Marine, a school teacher, a U.S. Secretary of State in the Education Secretary in State of Virginia. What is that U.S. Pakistani-American identity?
I think it's a very special identity. I think that Pakistan is a nation of, resiliency, nation of determination, immigrant. It has its rich history that actually started probably prior to 1947 even, right? Like, I mean, I understand the importance of independence because we dealt with colonization and we, really were resilient. And I was brought up on all these great stories of, folks who, built the nation and really fought against British rule. And that is very similar to if you look at the American Revolution, right? And if you look at the determination of the founding fathers of America in fighting back against colonial rules. So I think there's a lot of parallels there that again, going back to the history, right? The way I guess my brain is designed is really looking at things from a historical context. So I think Pakistani Americans have a lot to offer in the larger American system and to the world, right? I think that especially if you look at the Pakistani American diaspora in the United States and specifically in DMV area where I am, there's a lot of talented folks who are working in federal government, who are working in the healthcare profession, in the education profession, who are now in the military. And I think that we have a lot to offer the world to make it a better place.
Pakistani Americans, there were other Pakistani American people in military, in Marines?
I've run into some, yes. I mean, I was one of the early ones, but there's a few others, especially in our kids' generation. We're seeing more and more people like going into different career paths other than the traditional career paths.
Several weeks ago, we met for the first time when we were together on a panel when Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger was also there in a Congress building. So the discussion was about Pakistan, about democracy. How do you look at Pakistan? How do you look at what's happening in Pakistan? Imran Khan, the struggle, the democracy.
Right. Yeah, so I've been, especially because I'm running for Congress, I'm paying a lot of attention to what's happening in Pakistan. I think that there is so much potential, especially because majority of the country is very young. It's one of the youngest nations, and I think there's enormous amount of potential that we have to really unleash that potential for the globe. It does break my heart that where there are injustices, when there are human rights violations, when the election, the way it was handled, it was really unfortunate. And I think we really need to address that in a meaningful way. And I think the United States has a role to play as well, because we do have a special relationship with Pakistan to really lean in to see that, hey, we can have, fair elections that represents the will of the people. And I truly believe that we need to strengthen our economic partnership. One of the things that's always bothered me about our global policy as Americans is that we often use other nations in the name of special interest. I think we mess up the world more. And I think we need to have a meaningful partnership with Pakistan. We can't have a partnership that's just solely based on a militaristic partnership.
But partnership in what areas? I mean, you must be thinking partnership in what areas? U.S. corporations are not interested in
healthcare, agriculture. So I'll give you one example. Moeed, is that when I was Secretary of Education in Virginia, we created a program with Virginia Tech University where we brought 60 government Pakistani teachers from all across all the different parts of Pakistan, and they came here to Blacksburg, Virginia. I actually met with them. So the State Department was involved, the Pakistani Embassy was involved, the Virginia Tech University was involved. There's a lot of different groups, and we created this awesome program where they were here for 6 weeks and they got professional development. Actually, unfortunately, COVID hit, so we had to suspend the program, but it was amazing. So that's just a small example where we can have meaningful partnerships with businesses. We can have more trade missions. We have an enormous amount of resources in Pakistan with agriculture. We have so much young people who are in the tech sector who can really, we live in a connected world where we're virtually connected. So we can have that. I'll give you another example is with working with, I'm an education consultant for a lot of ed tech companies. And there are some companies that I'm working with that are based out of India that are creating partnerships with the universities. And I always wonder, is like, why can't we have the similar model with Pakistan as well? Because there's a lot of talented people who are highly educated that we can do that, and we can uplift, not only we can improve, American society with the meaningful partnership, but also the Pakistani society, and really help in the education space, help close those, education gaps and inequities that might exist. So we as Americans are also not thinking creatively on how to create more, prosperous borders, prosperous partnerships. We also have the really a messed up view on how we deal with other countries and how we exploit them. So
What do
it
you
does
look,
bother me.
given this context of what you're saying, actually, how are you looking at these campus protests that started from Columbia
Mhm.
University and have now spread to almost 100 US university, college, polytechnics all across coast to coast, actually? I was just looking at New York Times. I mean, these protests have started touched Harvard and Yale and Princeton and Brown,
Colombia.
California Polytech. I mean, they are in University of Texas at Austin, University of Texas San Antonio, Rice University in Houston. They are touching in Florida. They're everywhere. I mean, apart from the hinterland and the interior of United States, on both coasts and in the South. I mean, these protests have really touched a raw nerve. I mean, so what do you think of that?
I think that there is a purity with our young people anywhere in the globe, is that they see a world and they want a better place for their future, right? So I'm taking a break from being a college professor at George Mason University. I'm also an alumni of George Washington University, and George
Mashallah.
Washington is following the same model. Columbia University, I'll give you one example, is that Edward Said, who was a leading humanities expert, Palestinian background and so forth, who wrote, Orientalism as one of his signature works. A lot of the faculty are actually supporting the students, and they're saying that when our whole humanities program was built by Edward Said, and there is a whole track that talks about genocide. And we really struggle with that. We have this curriculum, but then when we're seeing what's happening in the Middle East and what's happening in Palestine, it really contradicts that. Now,
Did
we
you
all
notice this, that Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, went to Columbia University? He was very arrogant. I mean, the students hooted at him. And he ended up basically saying, I mean, don't waste your parents' money, go to your classes. And then he said, I'm going to recommend to President Biden to basically send National Guards into Columbia University. And then, the university spokesman had to clarify that Mike Johnson is smoking pot. I mean, the National Guards are not coming into Columbia University.
they're not. It's a basic human right to this is your First Amendment right to express yourself in a peaceful way. Is part of our history, so we can't, suppress that voice of young people. What happened on October 7th was heinous. We can't justify that, but again, we have to look at a whole historical context of 76 years, and not just what's happening in Israel, but we have a very intimate, cozy, tight relationship from the Truman administration to the Biden administration. Every single administration has had a very close tie with Israel and has played a role in where we are, specifically what's happening to folks in Palestine, what's happening to the Palestinian people. So we have to reflect as a nation, as Americans too, is that, hey, what role have we played that's led to this moment?
But
And
President
it's our
Biden says, I'm a
responsibility.
Zionist.
I'm sorry?
This is the first US president, President Biden, he says, I'm a Zionist.
I mean, that's a concern, right? Because I think the framework we have in our American society. Here's the thing, what bothers me is that this at the macro level, there's this otherizing of people that look like us, like Muslims or Arabs, people from even South Asia and so forth. There's a marginalization, demonization, vilification from Hollywood to Bollywood, right? So there's a big picture that we're missing here. Palestine is at the front of it right now, but it's a big picture we're missing here. And this is where a lot of these intellectuals like Said dug deep, and they were ahead of this time, is that why are we having these problems? Why is it that a set of human beings are seen as less than? And as an American who, as Americans, we value freedom and democracy, but one of the things we have not gotten right is really leveling the way we see everyone. It's too much of otherization. When you otherize people, you see them as less than us, right? So we really have to get to the root cause of that. And everything is interconnected. I believe what's happening in Pakistan is interconnected what's happening in the Middle East, because the policies are interconnected, and we have to really draw.
Interesting. So you see there's the connection between Middle East and Pakistan.
I see that there's a global connection on how we conduct our global affairs, and America really leads the way, and we have our hands everywhere, and it's done through this lens where it's us versus the other. And the reason it took me several years to come to the realization is because when you're here as a Muslim person, as a brown person, you see the challenges that we face, and you see that playing out. So we have to really dismantle that. It's a form of injustice, right? It's a form of global injustice, just like how we have economic injustice, or we have environmental injustice, or climate injustice. We have to draw all of this together. There's a global injustice, and Muslims, unfortunately, across the globe are at the short end of this injustice.
Why? Why Muslims are at the receiving end of the injustice?
I think it's an extension of colonialism. What I would say is that we might have seen colonialism structures broken down, but I think our minds are still colonized. Even I'll give you one example, not to get off topic, but it is on topic, is that even now you were talking about, hey, folks are saying, hey, you want to make money, the American dream is about that, a lot of people who immigrate. I think that's a form of a colonized mindset. I feel like that a lot of people are not taking full ownership of their country, right? I've taken full ownership of my country, that, hey, I'm going to serve, and I'm going to alter the course of history, not only make history as being the first Pakistani or first Muslim, but also really taking the bull by the horn and altering the course of history to uplift everyone and change the society. So I think that what's happening in Pakistan is some accountability, providing a flashlight, but also what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening in Pakistan, because we need a long-term solution. Yes, we need an unconditional ceasefire. Yes, we should stop military funding to Israel, to stop. What is it that you all want? Let's give them some grace.
It's a very interesting thing. You basically said that when the South Asian immigrants come over here, they think of making money, a big house, pictures with the senators and congressmen. And that's also sort of an extension of the colonial mindset, in the sense that they think they're making money, have a big house. I mean, they don't think in terms of the societal contribution or integration, but they think in terms of having a big house, lots of money, big cars.
Yeah, I'm not trying to, be disrespectful to anyone. I think there's nothing wrong with enjoying life. People, they hustle every day. They deserve to live happily and enjoy life, right? But I do believe that it is a kind of a colonized mindset. So even like with my campaign and so forth, when I talk to a lot of people, they're like, hey, you have to sound more white. You have to look more white, dress this way, say this.
Someone said to you?
This is folks who are well-meaning,
okay,
who are from our background, will say, hey,
they want you to sound more white. They want you to look more white.
Right, exactly. But my thing is that I'm very popular amongst Democrats, right? So I'm like, hey, look, you have to be your authentic self, your real self, your individual self, and you have to maintain your identity. You have to embrace it. Like, I'm Atif Qarney. I'm not going to change my name to Andy or something, right? It's my identity. That's what my
Dawood's become David,
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that's part of being an American and a Pakistani-American, right? Really preserving our identity, because that's some name that my mother gave me, and it would be disrespectful to run away from that identity. And I think you can be both. You can be a proud Pakistani-American and a proud American and a proud Muslim American, and all of the above at the same time, and really take ownership of that. So we have to really deconstruct that in our mind too, and take ownership of that. And really, get into these decision-making places where policy is really made if we want to drive home change. Yes, it's important to protest and demonstrate. I'm all supportive of that. It's important to write to your Congress people. That's really important. But why not just take over the whole table? As Secretary of Education, a lot of teachers were very frustrated that they were not getting their fair justice. And I organized as a teacher, and that's why I became Secretary of Education and just took over the whole table. And that's why we had meaningful change in Virginia. It was the most historic.
I was intrigued. I wanted to ask you, but then we digressed towards Middle East and other issues. Then how was this quick journey from a middle school teacher to Secretary of Education? I mean, how this happened? I mean, most school teachers would not dream of becoming the Secretary of Education. So how it happened?
Yeah, so I, as a middle school teacher, I taught in a school that was economically significantly disadvantaged, a lot of immigrant communities, a lot of Black and brown children, and I saw a very anti-immigrant sentiment. I saw the inequities in education. The school I was teaching was not getting the same resources, and teachers were frustrated. So I started to organize politically, and that people recognized that at the grassroots level. So when the governor at that time, when he won, a lot of people from the grassroots advocated and saying that, hey, we want somebody that we trust, that who knows what they're doing, who cares about children in our communities, and we want them in charge of all of education. That's never happened in Virginia before. And I believe that I had that fighting spirit because I learned that as a Pakistani-American, because I grew up on stories of people fighting for independence, right? Having that resiliency and the determination of and then having the determination of an immigrant. So I think it actually played a role in shaping who I am. So was very fortunate to really lead those efforts, and then being appointed as Secretary of Education. And I took that job very seriously.
You might have been the first South Asian to become the Secretary of Education in the state of Virginia.
First South Asian, first Pakistani, first Muslim, first teacher right out of the classroom, right? So it was very historical. So I took that very seriously, and was very, very transformative. And that's actually positioned me really well for Congress.
What kind of challenge was this to be a Secretary of Education coming from a school?
It was, the reason it was challenging is because there's a lot of people counting on you to do the right thing. Because oftentimes when you get in positions of power, people forget the why they did this in the first place and who actually was responsible of getting them in that position. So one of the things I did was I really stayed in touch, and my advisors were my friends, who were my teachers, who I still talk to this day, were my closest confidant, and they're constantly in my ear saying, hey, this is what policy should look like. Constantly staying in touch with the community. So it's just very, very important. And I believe that's
I've seen the testimonials. I mean, so many teachers vouch for you. I mean, they're supporting they think that you did a great job. But what were the challenges as being Secretary of Education? I mean, and what do you think were your achievements?
So the challenges were that you're operating in a lot of white spaces, right? So it's a very powerful position where I control the $20 billion budget. You're overseeing all of the universities, and you're overseeing all of the K-12 divisions. I mean, millions of people. You have a lot of power, influence, and that could be, you can get lost in that, right? Because everybody's, being really extra nice to you, and a person can get lost with that. We have to stay humble. So that's a big challenge. The other thing is that, the pandemic, for example, hit. I had to make a call to close down schools. That was very politicized, very, very challenging. Also taking some important stances on issues, which unfortunately got politicized, because when you're trying to drive home systemic change is very uncomfortable for people. And you have to be very comfortable with uncomfortable conversations and lead from the front. And this is like, because I was a Marine, Marines in their DNA is that, they're really comfortable with leading from the front and really not leaving anyone behind. So that was also baked into my philosophy and my DNA in leading. But yeah, I was able to establish a free community college, was able to expand preschool, public preschool. I dove into teaching a more honest history. So I spearheaded the African-American History Education Commission, because Virginia is a southern state, and this is where the capital of the Confederacy was. So imagine a Pakistani guy, a Muslim guy, leading an effort in the most historic state in revamping our history standards, right? That is pretty cool. So that's the thing, is that, again,
I was reading this and it struck me. I mean, when you realize this thing that Virginia is so close to Washington, it's just a stepping stone away, and Virginia was a center of the Confederacy. I mean, and then Maryland decided to stay neutral between Washington and Virginia, and then you are a brown man, first generation immigrant, becoming Secretary of Education in the state of Virginia. I mean, it's amazing, isn't it?
That's the beauty of that's the American dream right there. Anything is possible.
So tell me now, I mean, you have achieved a lot and you're very humble. I mean, for someone who has served in this powerful position in a rich state like Virginia, as Secretary of Education, you're very humble. What do you want to do in the Congress if you make it?
Yeah, inshallah, I will make it. We're working hard. We have an awesome team. Again, it's really looking at a lot of systemic injustices. I have a community plan that looks at the affordability and quality of healthcare, that looks at affordable housing options, because the cost of living is very high where I am. I'm really focused on public servants like teachers and nurses, because half of the teachers and nurses that live in this district, work in this district, can't afford to live here. So looking at those economic injustices is very, very critical. And then I'm also looking at the overall budget. Like if you look at the congressional budget, very little is focused on things like education, right? A lot of it is focused on national security. Now, I'm not a pacifist, I'm a military guy, as we discussed. But if you look at and dig deeper, there's a lot of wastage of money, and we also are making the world a less safe place. For example, the military aid that was passed recently that's going to Israel to continue.
$95 billion.
So it's going.
$61 billion actually going to Ukraine, which is the military. $26.4 billion is going to
Israel. About $14.2 billion for the Israel package right now. So the Ukraine one, it's we don't want to get dragged into a third world war. Russia is an aggressor. I understand the nuances about that. What I hoped would have happened is that we would have broken it down and itemized different packages, not lump it together. And this is the problem, right? In politics is that, we don't do things in the most ideal way possible. Because if I was in Congress, I would vote down this package. That means that I would disagree with most of the people in Congress, including people in my party. Because
15 Republicans made strident speeches against the bill and the money for the Ukraine. They supported the money for Israel. One of the guy I heard his speech, I think he's a Republican from Arkansas or somewhere. I think E.D. Vance or something like this.
Mm-hmm.
A very strong case for not giving money to the Ukraine and basically striking for peace with Russia.
And that's fine, right? But on the other side, they're okay with the ongoing genocide in Israel being conducted by the Israeli government. Bibi Netanyahu, who is not acting in good faith right now, for the last 20 years, if you look at his track record, it's really to drive out Palestinians or exterminate them, right? So he's not acting in good faith. He's a right-wing extremist. So this is where I see the problem in the Republican Party. But on the Democratic side, I'm a Democrat. I also see that the conversations I'm having with my congressional delegation members who we have disagreements with is that we need to break this down. Right now, I know they have moved gradually towards a more peaceful solution. They weren't there 6 months ago, but still, there was no need to couple this package together. They could have broken it down. I'm all for humanitarian relief of any form, whether it goes to the Palestinians.
The irony is this: they have kept $1 billion for humanitarian causes as well. The money is going to go to Gaza.
Exactly, and it's not even getting there. So it's really unfortunate. But while in Congress, your question was in Congress, right? So in addition to the injustices that exist domestically, the global injustices really leaning in, right? So this seat. The reason it's so important, if any of your viewers live in this district, that not only is a historic election to get representation, because there is no Pakistani, nobody from my background in Congress, but more importantly, if somebody wins a seat, they can sit in there for a decade and they can gain seniority and they can really lean into a lot of these issues, whether it's strengthening U.S. and Pakistan economic partnership and really holding even what's happening in Pakistan with some accountability, providing a flashlight, but also what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening in Pakistan, because we need a long-term solution. Yes, we need an unconditional ceasefire. Yes, we should stop military funding to Israel to stop, killing innocent human beings. But we also need a meaningful solution that centers the voices of the Palestinian people to see, okay, what is that you all want? Let's give them some grace and a time to breathe and think about, okay, what is that you want? And what does that long-term solution look like? So those are types of things that need to be in the mind of people serving in Congress. Right now, the problem in Congress, we talk about corruption in other countries. There's a lot of legalized corruption in America right now, that there's so much special interest money, and that is really destroying the fabric of America. It wasn't the case 40, 50 years ago. If you look at, again, from historical context, of where we were, 70% of Congress was made up of middle working class Americans about 40, 50 years ago. That's less than 10% now. It's made up of millionaires. It's made up of people who are beholden to special interest groups. So we as Americans.
How do you look at the SCOT group? Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Ocasio, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I mean, what is this phenomenon?
So I think that, they're well-meaning but they're again being marginalized, right? They're being otherized. That they're labeled. They are labeled that, hey, that they're difficult to work with, and they have been labeled that way, right? And I'm not in agreement with a lot of the methods too, right? I'm not a tweeting social media like always just being negative, like attacky. But policy-wise, if you look at some of the policies they're pushing for, really well-meaning policies that would uplift a lot of people, right? So this is the challenge in our politics, is that folks who want to really do meaningful work, because they're not playing by the same rules that are set in place, this legalized corruption I'm talking about, they're marginalized, they're otherized, right? And we have to get more champions of justice to really, address and really lean in. And when we build up a critical mass of people like me and others who are really championing justice, that's how we bring about meaningful change.
Last set of questions. I mean, my question, so how would you take a very mixed community, which consists of the immigrants from Africa and South Asia and white and Hispanic and blacks? What is the common ground? How are you going to be the leader of all this community?
Yeah, I'm a great representation because I've worked with all these different communities in different ways, right? The way you represent those communities is by actually spending time and listening to them, their concerns. There's a lot of diasporas. I probably met with, in the last 6 months, I counted 17 different diasporas. So there's a Turkish community, there's a lot of African, sub-diasporas. There's, of course, the South Asians, there's Bangladeshis. Even in the Indian American diaspora, there's a lot of different groups, right? There's Tamil, Telugu, Hyderabadi, everything. Even in Pakistani diasporas, right? There's different subgroups, there are different cliques. So you have to spend a lot of time to get to know and listen to concerns. And this is where cultural competency, and again, being an immigrant who has not had their voice heard and being sensitive to that really helps. I think it adds to the Congress because you don't take things for granted, that you say, hey, look, I have been, my voice has been silenced, and I'm going to go extra step to really listen to a lot of perspectives. And I think that being a Pakistani-American has actually helped me with that competency.
So when is the decisive primary?
May 3rd is next Friday. A week from today is when early voting begins. So early voting is going to be 45 days of early voting. It's no excuse voting in Virginia. And the election day will be June 18th.
And how many candidates are there in the primary?
There are a dozen candidates. The reason there's so many candidates from the Democratic nomination is it's a very blue seat. So whomever wins on June 18th will likely be the next congressperson.
Atif Qarney, I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Moeed.
On my behalf and the behalf of all the viewers, we wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you. Thank you.